Hello, welcome back to Mrs. Hewitt's Spelling at Home, your Key Stage 2 word study session. So for today, we have a new root morpheme. Our morpheme today is a bound morpheme. What does that mean? Yes, it means that it can't be a word by itself. It has to be attached to prefixes and suffixes. And our bound morpheme today, our root that we're looking at is this. It is frag. Okay, you can see that from the bottom. It's from the Latin frangere, or might be frangere, probably frangere, which means to break. Okay, so all these words that we're going to look at today have got that root frag in and are relating to breaking of some sort. So what I want you to do, because we're sort of moving on a bit now, I've been doing this for quite a long time, when you build your words, I want you to then think about what those words mean using your knowledge of your prefix and suffixes. So when I do the word sums, I sort of explain, don't I? Explain what the words mean, explain how the prefixes and the suffixes contribute to that meaning. Well, I'm going to be asking you to do that a little bit today. So you might have to pause the video a few more times because I want you to do some explaining. Okay, so get ready first of all to pause the video for the morpheme grid so you can actually build your words. So build the words first, then unpause me and we'll talk a bit more about them, okay? So that is your grid. Okay, so hopefully you have built quite a few words there. Now, let's think about this. How do I want to do this? Okay, so I'm going to show you one of the words, or two of the words at the top that I've made. So I have made this one. So we've got frag and isle. Actually, because we've got an I after that letter G, it becomes the soft G, the G. So we've got fragile. And then we've also got here fragility. So you can see that as the fragile with the itty, and we get rid of that E because we've got a suffix beginning with a vowel. So we've got fragile and fragility. So think about, fragile is an adjective, and fragility is talking about, it's a noun talking, it's a noun talking about a property of something. So how do they relate to the root word meaning to break? So have a think of that now. Okay, so hopefully you could figure out that if something was being described as fragile, for example, this vase was very fragile, you might think, that means that it might break quite easily, or it's to do with breaking, okay? Because we know that that frag means to break. So we've got fragile and fragility. Talk about somebody's fragility, means they're quite fragile, basically, or a thing. So we've also got this word here, fragment. That could be a noun or a verb. So you could talk about a fragment or some fragments. Again, if the fragile vase broke, you might end up with little fragments, so little bits that have broken, okay? Or you could talk about something fragmenting. So I could talk about you fragmenting these words, really, about breaking them up. Okay, so you could have fragment, and then I've got here fragmentation. So that is the act of putting something into fragments. And you can see, you know why I've done this one, don't you? It's because it's a shun. So fragmentation. Again, drop that E, it's a shun with a T-I-O-N because of the 8. Ation tends to always be a T because it's from that 8, the 8 bit here, okay? Right, this one, defragmenting. You might also hear that sometimes called defragging, which is actually short for defragmenting. So have a think about what that might mean using your knowledge now of fragmenting and your knowledge of what the prefix D means. So explain to somebody or have a think at home what defragmenting might mean. Okay, let's see. So we know that D means kind of not, or the opposite of, or the undoing, okay? So if we have, we could have fragmenting, which is obviously meaning to break. So defragmenting means to unbreak. And if you think about you defragging maybe a computer or a computer program, that's actually to do with undoing all the glitches, undoing all the breaks in it. So it's defragmenting actually would mean undoing all those breaks. And then these two at the bottom, I wonder if you even had thought of this having the frag root morpheme in, but we've got suffrage and suffragette and suffragism. So those of you that have studied the suffragettes, have a think about why or how the word frag, meaning break, might apply to this. And what does this suff mean here? Don't forget the F sometimes changes when we've got a double F, when we've got an F followed by our root. So have a think now, what's that suff mean? And what does this mean all together? Okay, so the suff has replaced sub. Okay, so we know, and sub meaning from under, so under or below. So we've got under, and then we've got breaking, and the et is to do with a person, and the ism is to do with like a movement. Okay, so basically suffrage in itself is the breaking under. In the online dictionary looking at etymology, it talks about it being anything to do with voting against, basically. So it's trying to be a bit of a rising up against the establishment or sort of breaking underneath. So the suffrage bit there, and then we've got suffragette and suffragism, but that suff comes from sub, meaning underneath, so low. And if you think about the women, the suffragettes were definitely considered lower, weren't they? And they wanted to kind of change that. Okay, hopefully you have learned lots there, and we're going to try and do that now. So as you're building your words, you need to try and think about the meanings as well, and how that relates to the building of the words and possibly where it's come from, because that's going to really help you with your reading if you come across words that you don't know. You need to write a sentence or two now, so I think maybe try one with fragment or really fragile as well, because that's where you've got that soft G. So you've got fragile or fragility. Have a go at writing a sentence, and then I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.